Hi students, this is Sister Nasia from the Department of English presents to you the novel The Color Purple by Alice Walker. We shall discuss the novel, the story, the themes and the significance of the title. Set in rural Georgia during segregation, The Color Purple brings components of 19th century slave autobiography and sentimental fiction together with a confessional narrative of sexual awakening. Alice Walker's The Color Purple tells the story of Celie, a black woman in the South. Celie writes letters to God in which she tells about her life, her roles as daughter, wife, sister, and mother. In the course of her story, Celie meets a series of other black women who shape her life. Nettie, Celie's sister, who becomes a missionary teacher in Africa. Shagawari, the blues singer, her husband, Mr. Dash, is in love with, and who becomes Celie's salvation. Sophie, the strong-willed daughter-in-law, whose strength and courage inspire Celie. Throughout the story, Celie is the center of this community of women, the one who knows how to survive. Now let us discuss how The Color Purple fits into African American literature. The number of male African American critics complained that the novel reaffirmed old racist stereotypes about pathology in black communities and of black men in particular. Critics also charged Walker with focusing heavily on sexism at the expense of addressing notions of racism in America. How does the rejection of African Americans within African tribes relate to the rejection of Americans in the United States? What about internal racism? In The Color Purple, Walker was always aware of the problems of personal relations of her men and women. The Color Purple touches on hardships many African Americans encountered, such as sexism, lesbianism, rape, and religion. This book is also unique in its characteristic that racism isn't as dominating as several other works categorized as African American literature. Nevertheless, internal racism causes for the black community to not be able to move forward as a whole and only more as individuals. It is also very ironic for racism and oppression to be an issue among African Americans when their ancestors were forced to come to this country facing these same issues. The suffering the enslaved Africans received was so damaging that the effects are still seen to this day. Coming to sexism, the majority of the men and women involved in the story believe that men should dominate women. Harpo feels threatened by his strong-willed, defiant wife, Sophia, and tries to become physically stronger than her so that he can beat her and return things to what he sees as their natural order. Throughout the book, women are degraded by men and treated as second-class citizens. This inequality mirrors the inequality between the races. What is the impact of each of the following female relationships in Celie's life? Think about motherhood, sisterhood, and love. Let us look at Nettie's life. Nettie helps develop Celia's mind by educating her and going to school for both of them. Living in Africa and caring for her children, Nettie's lives lives for both herself and her sister. She writes Celie about God and religion and stirs a different belief in Celie. Celie's achievement of knowledge and understanding of herself is paralleled in The Color Purple by her sister Nettie's newly developed religious beliefs. Nettie had a better education and lives a better life than Celie does. It is the thought of her sister that keeps Celie alive and makes her put one foot in front of the other every morning. Coming to life of Shagaveri, it is through Shag that Celie ultimately discovers herself and her voice. She learns to grow into her skin and fight for herself. Under Shag's influence, Celie has matured into a person who has developed enough self-awareness and self-confidence to challenge tradition's hegemonic impulse. If her decision to leave her husband demonstrates Celie's determination to break away from the old way of life, her starting a business to make pants for women suggests her readiness to create a new life for herself, regardless of what social norm dictates. As we know, women were not supposed to wear pants in the 1930s. Now let us look what about religion represented by Nettie. Shagaveri, what are the similarities and differences? Do you see any irony in what they believe in? Any transformation at the end of the story? Nettie, although she is working as a missionary, in her letters she never talks of anyone converting. Nettie mentions taking pictures down of God because they don't look right in her hut. Soon after her arrival in Africa, Nettie writes that the people are sunk in spiritual and physical confusion. They believe in the devil and worship the dead. The Africans who were enslaved and came here with their African religions and tribal rituals, and they eventually adopt the religion of their oppressor. When they come here, they are told to be civilized, they have to become Christians, and as Christians, they must be therefore submissive, accepting of their role, their status in life, and their reward will come in heaven. And somehow, African Americans say that God identifies with those who are oppressed, with the least among us, those who have been rejected. How is Alice Walker's way of structuring her novel reflecting of the personal growth of the main character Celie? We can see here the way Walker formats her book with so many different and individual conflicts among and within the characters is a metaphor for how Celie is not just herself but connected to all those around her. Walker is showing us through Celie that although we may be ourselves, we are also part of a bigger circle, and who we are is transformed on whose path we cross in life. Thus, like the scraps of clothes sewn into Celie's patchwork quilt, characters' lives in the color purple are stitched together into a unity whose strength and vibrancy depend on each individual's identification with and distinction from the others around him or her. Those named and not named. What do you think is Walker's reason for using or not using last names? In general, as well as specific to characters. In general, Walker uses blanks instead of the male characters' last names to draw attention to male dominance. In specific, for Mr. Dash, Walker is highlighting the dark side of this character, an identity too dangerous to reveal. You can see his character start to transform when Walker begins to refer to him as Albert. In the case of Reverend Mr. Dash, whom Nettie later marries, you see his transformation happen faster than Albert's because of his change, his perspective once he moves to Africa. Celie, Harpo, Coraine, Nettie and other relatives by blood or marriage have their surnames withheld because of the removal of Albert's and Samuel's surnames. Thus, Celie and Nettie, for example, do not have married surnames because of them for both Albert and Samuel. Withholding is also notable in Nettie's account of her and Celie's true origins rather than identifying their parents by name. Nettie emphasizes their family relationship. Let us look at the significance of the title Color Purple. The title of the film is an important symbol. In the Western, purple symbolizes elegance, authority, and dignity. At the beginning of the story, Celie does not wear purple clothes, which suggests that she has not got independence and self identity. With Sheg's help, Celie begins to make a living by herself, gets independence on the economy. She sets up Fox Pants Unlimited Company and then makes pants for one of her sisters, Sophie. She chooses red and purple in the pants, which shows that Celie begins to get dignity. At the end of the story, decorated with red and purple, she possesses her own house and gets anything she likes to adorn her room. The changing of colors indicates that, faced with the future, she becomes optimistic towards life. Albert, the husband of Celie, has carved a purple frog to her as a gift. It denotes the recognition for Celie, the equality of black men and women, and the respect that the black woman regained. Celie, the protagonist of the novel, undergoes a series of changes from a downtrodden, degraded, despised, abused, and misu- sorry, misused things to an independent and liberated woman. So here ends the analysis of the novel, The Color Purple. Now look at the assignments. Since the novel is entitled The Color Purple, what role does the color purple play in the story? Why is the story made up of several letters mainly written by Celie? What kind of the point of view is adopted in the story? So I came to the end of the presentation. Thank you.